live and direct from anywhere in the world. It's The Kelley Show with Dr. Kelley Mondesire.
Hello and welcome back to The Kelley Show, real people with real stories in real time. And I am your host, Dr. Kelley Mondesire. And today we're kicking off another wonderful and exciting month, the month of transformation and reinvention. And today we're off to Scotland to speak with a very, very special guest and a powerhouse. And there's a very big reason why we're kicking off the month with him. So stay tuned after a word from our sponsor, and we'll get rolling.
This portion of The Kelley Show is being brought to you by White Wolf Advisory Services. We are the bridge between nations, creating growth, commerce and collaboration between cultures. Contact us today for more information.
Welcome back to The Kelley Show, real people with real stories in real time. And today, my very special guest is coming to you live from Scotland. He is the voice that lifts rooms. Mike Stevenson, come on down. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Well, I'm fine. I'm delighted to be here as well. From sunny Scotland. Yes, you heard it from me first. It is sunny in Scotland. I am now an international speaker. I aim to give people that sense that anything for them is possible. And I do that because I've had a life of constant reinvention myself, so I know anything's possible. And when you talk from your own experience, you give people real life examples to draw on, and that's really important. So that's why I do what I do now.
Okay. Well, you have a very interesting story. So let's start with when you were young, and we have an amazing photograph of you we're going to put up. I still say you look like a European actor here, or you should have been a model. But how old were you here, and what was going on in your life at the time? Please do tell and start the story.
Yeah, that's when I was about 26, and I had settled into life with a girlfriend in a flat in Edinburgh. I'd come back to Edinburgh after my travails, and I was feeling very settled then. And I think that these were the last few years when I made a living out of playing my guitar and singing, which was a nice little period in my life. And that was a very posed photograph. I do apologize for it. And I don't smoke cigars anymore.
Well, disappointing, but do continue the story. What happened to the music career, and talk to us about your journey. It's a very interesting story.
Well, look, I was thrown out of school at 15, and my family was falling apart, and I was being chased for my life by a gang, and I'd had a looming death threat from someone who believed I had spoken to his girlfriend. So things were pretty difficult at home. So I escaped to London. And actually I got a job within a day of arriving in London and a bed and breakfast. But after 3 days working in the job, I was told the customers couldn't understand a word I said in my Scottish accent. So I was sacked. And I went back to my bed and breakfast and I said, I've lost my job. I was only 16 at the time. And the landlady said, well, if you've lost your job, you can't stay here. So I was asked to pack up my meager belongings and go out into the big wide world. And so that was the start of sleeping out in London for over a year, which was uncomfortable, challenging, sometimes cold, sometimes very threatening. I mean, I had a gun pulled on me, a knife pulled on me, but it was also formative in that you had to meet challenges every day. You had to be creative and adapt. Really come with solutions to daily challenges. Sometimes that challenge was finding a place to sleep when it was really cold. Sometimes it was, moving away from someone who was trying to kill you, literally. And sometimes it was just coping with the misery of, being out there at a very young age. And I suppose I was quite vulnerable, although that vulnerability began to shift as I got stronger and more able to defend myself and more able to, adapt to any circumstance I found myself in. So to that extent, it was a really strong learning experience. And then, I had two experiences which really defined what was going to happen in the future. The first, I was picked up by a charity one night and taken to this big hostel. And when I arrived in the hostel, I was very thankful for this chance to sleep overnight in a hostel because it was -3 outside. And I was shown into this tiled room. The next thing I know, I was told to take my clothes off. And then when I complied with this instruction, a hose was pointed at me and it was unleashed, back to front, top to bottom. And I felt so humiliated. I escaped back into the streets because at least then there I had a modicum of dignity. And that taught me something really important. And it is this: we have hundreds of interactions each day. Whether we're out shopping with our family, with people at work, with strangers that you meet. And we always have a choice to lift people's spirits or to sink them. And, I didn't even have a name at that stage. No one asked me what my background was. I felt like a piece of meat that was being put through a process. So that was really a horrible experience. So I avoided at all costs all those agencies that were there to support me and help me, at least in name. So that was a horrible learning point because I didn't trust anyone that said I can help you. So the most astonishing thing is that the greatest moment of inspiration came from the police after I'd been arrested one night. And I was arrested for stealing a crate of fish, which had been deposited outside a fish shop, which I'm not proud of. But, of course, it wasn't a very sophisticated robbery because as I was trailing this crate of fish, all this fish oil was spilling onto the pavement. So the police had a very easy job in finding me. So they caught me and I was taken to a cell. And, of course, there were a few jokes flying around, give you a night to mull it over. Stuff like that. And in the morning, as I was leaving the police station, because they weren't going to press charges, it was too small a crime, but the police sergeant said to me, "Michael, we don't want to see you back here." And I said, "Well, that makes two of us." And he asked me, "What are your dreams, Michael? What are your dreams?" And I said something like, "Oh, I just want to get a place to stay and keep warm and a job." And he said, "They're not your dreams, they're your next steps." So I had to dig deeply. And I came to those things that really preoccupied me. And one was to play music and do well in music, because I played the guitar and I sang. And the other was to set up a business. So I mentioned these to him as dreams that I had and I held dear to me. And he said, "Brilliant, go off and start making them happen." And something switched in me because, so many people hide their dreams. They never ask what their dreams are. And dreams are something that as a child you think is unattainable unless someone says, go for them. But no one ever asks you. So here I was, I'd made a real statement. I'd said it to a real person. So I felt a commitment to do something. And a year later, I was busking in Dublin with my guitar, but a guitar I'd borrowed. So I'd gone from London to Dublin. I was standing at the top of Grafton Street and I was belting out songs and I was going down a storm and I was bringing money in, and there was an extraordinary change in me because I realized then that I was a performer and I loved doing it. The stage held no fears for me. And strangely, at that time, two guys came to watch me playing and they invited me for a drink in the pub that night. It was two members of Thin Lizzy, a band that went on to achieve great things, but were just setting out at that stage. So I became friends with them and liked them a lot. And so it was a real awakening for me. I was a performer. I met so many people because I became a magnet for people rather than having to try and wander around and worm my way into company. And that was a huge confidence boost. And I also listened to the stories of the older people in the Dublin bars, because in those days when you went to a bar, they weren't, niche bars. They were places where everyone went. So you got young people like me and very old people who had lived through an extraordinary period in Irish history. And so I listened to their stories, and it made me a storyteller in my own right, because I started telling my story and people were fascinated by that. I don't really had a short life, but, I'd done a lot, even in that short life. So I learned about storytelling, and that was a breakthrough for me, because I found it quite easy as a Scot, as a Celt, because the Celts are pretty natural storytellers, particularly in parts of Scotland and all of Ireland. So here I was, sitting in bars telling people stories, and I was listening to their stories, and it was absolutely fascinating. So I discovered something else about myself. I went on to play in festivals and clubs, and I had a few years where I did quite well out of my music. So that was brilliant. I loved it.
Yeah. How did you get into doing public speaking? And we have a few photos of you in some of the different bars that you, I'm sure, have been telling your stories after your music years. But here you are giving a TEDx talk. How did you go from telling tales in the local bars to giving a TEDx talk?
After, a period of doing really well, I went back to London. I was determined to conquer the city, just get jobs, keep the jobs, have somewhere to stay. And I did lots of jobs because I wanted to experience, all those things that fascinated me as a child, builders with concrete encrusted trousers, people washing windows, people working in garages with the smell of oil, all these sensory experiences. And I wanted to do them, so I did that. I worked in construction, I worked in steel, I worked in wine corking, and I can't tell you all the jobs I did, but I experienced all those things I watched men do and whistle when they were working when I was young. So I had so many jobs. And then I went back to my home city of Edinburgh, a stronger, more confident, more talkative, higher performing person than the person that left many years before that. So I then wanted to do something, with people, work-wise. Well, still performing. I still performed at the Edinburgh Fringe, and I did occasional gigs. But then I got a job as a community development worker, which meant I was in this community that was impoverished, and I had to make things happen for them and with them. So I became really quite persuasive at getting other people to find their voice and to find their confidence and to find those parts of themselves that they didn't even know existed. So that was enlisting their talents and their capabilities. And that was a huge learning thing in my life, because I found that you could do that people really did not consider their own talents, their own abilities, because they'd never been challenged to produce them, and they didn't even know they existed. So, during that period, we set up a housing association in Leith, which is a poorer part of Edinburgh at the time. And that meant we were able to buy, with government funding, we were able to compulsory purchase from those landlords that were just letting people languish in the dirt. They had no hot water, no running hot water, no baths, no sinks, sometimes outside toilets. So here was an opportunity to deliver something like that. And it was astonishing because, you found people in the community who became real champions. They were able to stand up at meetings, they were able to talk, they were able to chair meetings. All those things that they would never have had the opportunity to do. And they were managing their own housing association. So that was a huge thing. And then I was headhunted for a job through in Glasgow to set up this organisation which, went from 6 to 600 people in 10 years. And I was the marketing director. And this is about giving people jobs that were really purposeful and needed in the city of Glasgow, and giving them training and giving them discipline, and helping them to move on to jobs in their own right afterwards. And I found the same thing. People were low in confidence. People didn't answer you when you said, could you tell me what your strengths are? And then you'd find out, on further inquiry, this is the same guy that, on a Saturday goes out and sits with an old lady, then goes and does her shopping, brings his shopping back there, sits and have a cup of tea, and he looks out for her because she looks out for him when he was a child. And then on the Sunday, he goes up and he trains youngsters in soccer skills. I say soccer because I'm speaking, I know, to an American audience. So I say to them, but that means that you've got something special. And it took me a long time to change the questioning, to try and elicit. But I'd had this experience. And then, I left after about 9.5 years, came back to Edinburgh, and I wanted to set up my own company. And I found this guy who would be a co-founder, and we set up a creative agency doing, astonishing things for some of the biggest clients across the UK, and getting great feedback and winning awards. And so that was a time of great success for me. And my profile increased quite dramatically in the business world. And I started getting asked to go and give talks because I always argued that if you were working in branding with a company, for example, it's not simply about applying a brand, it's something more than that. And so I started speaking, first of all, to my clients' employees, because if they wanted to change something, they would bring me in to be the cheerleader, the champion, and the explainer of what was going to happen and how it would benefit everyone in the organization. So that's how I started speaking. And then, when the company folded during the banking crisis, I had no choice. The bottom fell out of the market and there was no money coming in. So I had to reluctantly close the company. And then I went into speaking as my chief way of earning money. And, I've done really well on it, but COVID posed a big problem. And now I'm trying to get really back into it because I think my time has arrived. Look around the world. Look at the problems we're facing. Look at the anxiety that exists in every workplace, in every community. It's my time.
For true. And this conversation is very timely and serendipitous that we're speaking here in May after so much tumultuous day-to-day events, that's for sure. But we're going to take a little break to have a word from our sponsors, and we'll be right back.
This portion of the show is brought to you by Many Purple Hats, MPH, Vroom! Get noticed online. Stand out from the crowd. Differentiate yourself from all that white noise. Vroom!
Welcome back. I'm here with my buddy Mike Stevenson from Edinburgh, Scotland, and he is the voice that lifts rooms. We talked about my pronunciation prior, but I don't know, Mike, your accent and mine, I don't know. So I have a question. You've done so much in your life and you've spoken to so many thousands, maybe millions of people. If you could share any pearls of wisdom with any person, young or old, who's struggling with their own demons or conditions of life right now, especially in this tumultuous world we're living in, what would you share with those folks?
Well, I think the first thing is that, times like these are tumultuous. They create havoc. They play with people's sense of, themselves, what role they have in the world. Do they have a role in the world? A lot of uncertainty now, particularly amongst young boys, who seem to have suffered more over the last 10 years than any other part of society, because they don't see kind of role that traditionally, when I was growing up, we're industrial. There were all kinds of male roles, at least they were at the time, and there's no great battle going on. So boys were traditionally taken off to battle, and many lost their lives. And this sense of powerlessness and purpose and lack of purpose is dominating. So when people are in that situation, the first thing you say is, look, it's times like these that provide the best opportunities, because almost everything can go now. I mean, there's going to be a huge change, from globalization to something very different, and that provides opportunities. But when people get really stuck, and I've been there, boy, have I been there. I've been on the brink of suicide. I've been, drugged up to my eyeballs, almost dying in the streets. So I know what it's like. So I can see that, and people listen to that, because that's important. It's important. I'm not coming from some high and mighty place where I'm talking down to people. This is about, I know where you are. And, there are things you need to do now. Even if it's just tidying your bedroom, doing something, do something that requires a bit of activity. And then do a celebration march around the room, because it is small accomplishments that get you to that place where you can start to breathe again, start to realize that actually you can do things. The other thing I say is, to go out, because the hardest place to accomplish anything from is your bedroom. It's where you've decided to hunker down and not face the world. It's to go out and pull your shoulders back and talk to a stranger. Just say hello, or say something, ask a question like, what's the time? Do anything to interact with people. And, that begins to get your adrenaline flowing. And you get small accomplishments, you get the feeling of having done something. And that's the start. And then to look at, what the spaces are around you, and to think, what space can I fill? Do I want to go and learn? Do I want to go and get any job? Because any job teaches you something. I'm just saying this, when I worked in construction, 10 years later, me and a girlfriend were buying a house, and we chose this basement flat in the new town in Edinburgh, which was just gutted. It had wires hanging down. It had nothing going for it. Floorboards were all ripped up. There was no toilet. And I said, look, I could do this. I've worked in construction. I can do this. And I tell people that. I did no formal training, but I learnt all these things in construction. I put the house together, apart from the plumbing, because I'm terrified of plumbing. And it became a little show flat for all our friends, because they loved it. I used bold yellows, very bold primary colours. And because it was a basement, so I learnt all that from the construction site. I even made a bed, a pine bed. So these are things I learnt by working. And, getting any kind of job is a good starter. And when people see that you've worked in jobs, it gives them the confidence that you've got application, that you can, you can speak to people, that you can work in a team, that you can accomplish things, you can get out of bed in the morning, and it just takes you that step further. But, but there's something else that I learned about myself, which everyone should learn. And that is that we have got these talents, we've got these skills. We need to start, thinking about those things that we dream of, to think of something bigger than yourself. I remember arriving in this building site, and every job had been do this, do that, as tasks were assigned. and I arrived in this building site, and there was a Welsh foreman who put his arm around me. He says, "Welcome, Michael. Before we start, I want to show you something." And he showed me the plans and said, "This is the Palliser building." It was astonishing. I felt this surge of energy. You know,
who or what experience in your life would you be thankful or grateful for? Who or what would that be?
Okay, well, the police sergeant who said to me, you know, who asked me what my dreams were and would not accept those small steps that I would take. He would not accept them. And he wouldn't let me go until I did that.
Do you remember his name?
No, I can't. No, I'm sorry.
Oh, too bad, because we would want to thank him. I want to thank you, Mike, for coming on and sharing your story. And there's so much more to tell. So if you would like to reach out to my buddy here, Mr. Mike Stevenson, and hear much more of his story, which is quite amazing, we've got his contact information up here, his book. It's out on Amazon. Reach out to Mike. He is an extraordinary person, and he will respond, and he's available for public speaking and consulting. Mike, I want to thank you so much for being on the show today. When I get up to Edinburgh again, I'll definitely be ringing you up. We'll share a whiskey.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, thank you.
It's a pleasure.
And if you would like to be on The Kelley Show, please do write in, contact us. Information is here below with your name, your contact information, a bit about your story, but more importantly, why you would like to be on The Kelley Show. And don't forget to subscribe today to The Kelley Show. Again, contact information is here. Subscribe, view some of our past episodes. Stay tuned every Tuesday for more amazing shows as we kick off and continue the month of May, the month of transformation and reinvention with tremendous powerhouses from across the world. So for now, love and light, peace and love. Gareth, take it away.
If you would like to be a guest on The Kelley Show, send us an email with your contact information, where in the world you are, and a brief description of the story you'd like to share today.